One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. It is that time again. We are here to talk about the Buzzsprout Global Stats. Yes, we are talking about June 2021 global stats for Buzzsprout. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so if you're brand new around here, this is the first bonus episode that you've ever heard for the global stats, and you're like, what are you even talking about? Buzzsprout has this incredible stats feature that they started in October of 2020, and it's so fascinating. So for the numbers nerds out there, you're going to love this if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, but we do one bonus episode a month that's dedicated to understanding what's going on in podcasting, and more specifically, what is happening within the Buzzsprout platform, because they have been so generous in sharing with us these numbers. Like, you can actually see how podcasting is growing and trending based on the data and the number that they share. So if you've been around here for a while, you're like, Krystal, we know what this is all about. Well, y'all are just going to have to wait, okay? Because I know we have some new listeners here, and I got to explain the process. So when you go back and listen to the previous months that we've done these bonus episodes, I just want you to understand what you're getting into before you really dive in headfirst. So we are talking about June 2021, and I'm just going to start off the top with how many active podcasts are on the Buzzsprout platform. So you'll hear me clicking around. I always tell people this. I warn you ahead of time that I'm going to be clicking in the background. And that is just because I am on the Buzzsprout stats page. So it's buzzsprout.com/global Buzzsprout_stats. We're going to have a link in the show notes where you're listening to this. There's not actual show notes for these bonus episodes, but wherever you're listening, you're going to be able to find the URL for the Buzzsprout Global Stats. And maybe it's just me, but I have so much fun going and looking to see like, well, how much did it change? And like, what can we actually deduce from all this information? And previously, I've done a comparison of month over month, but here we are, we can evaluate the first 6 months of 2021. So that's what I want to do. If you're wondering, well, how much has podcasting actually changed in 6 months? We're going to do a comparison from January 2021 to June 2021, just to give you an idea of how quickly, how rapidly podcasting is growing. So in January, there were 91,200 active podcasts on the Buzzsprout platform. I know that sounds like a lot because it is. It is a whole bunch. And that was just in January. From January to June, there are now 105,000 active podcast. It's 105,000 and some change, but we're just going to do a lot of rounding up, right? To keep the numbers a little bit prettier. But y'all, that is a big deal. That means in 6 months, there have been 15,000 podcasts added to the Buzzsprout platform. And the reason why I think that this is so important is because people are constantly saying like, well, I just don't know. I don't know if this is the right time for me to start my podcast. I'm like, this is the best time for you to start your podcast because these numbers are expected to just keep trending upward. And I just say jump on the train while we're moving along in a steady motion because we're having a lot of fun, guys. For anybody that hasn't started their podcast, we are having a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. So I want you to join in on this. So there were 91,000 in January. Now there's 105,000. So let's go into how many new episodes. This number hasn't actually changed that much, which I find really interesting. So in January, there were 158,000 new podcast episodes in that 1 month. In that 1 month, there was 158,000. But now, having added a lot more podcasters, a lot more podcasts, that number only rose to 160,000. So the numbers that I can, make a conclusion, make an assumption about what this means is that people are starting podcasts, but there hasn't been an increase of someone saying, I'm going to start a podcast and publish every single day, or I'm going to publish, several times a month. People are probably rising at the rate of like, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm just going to publish like once a week. And we'll get down to those numbers here in a second, but I'm just kind of sharing with you my thoughts on what I think these numbers mean. And this isn't something to like go write your doctoral dissertation on these numbers whatsoever. It's just me sharing how things are changing over time and what that really looks like. The monthly downloads for Buzzsprout for June 2021 were over 77 million, which just blows my mind, right? Like this is not one single podcast. These are all of those 105,000 shows that are out there. They're getting about 77 million downloads a month. Isn't that crazy, y'all? Just think about that for a second. 77 million downloads per month are happening across 105,000 podcasts. That just gets me excited. And it gets me just fired up that so many people are excited about podcasting. But let's go to the numbers that people, it's funny because there was an IG Live with Anna. So she is the new community director over at Buzzsprout. And she's been doing a lot of Facebook Lives and IG Lives. And there was a conversation that I caught yesterday with Tom from Buzzsprout, and he is one of the co-founders, and he is very much into the development of the stats, the analytics, and understanding the back-end development of how Buzzsprout works. And I asked him the question, I was like, who do you think is going to be the big player, right? The big podcast player at the end of the day, or at the end of 2021, really is what I wanted to know, because there's been this battle between Spotify and Apple Podcast. And Apple Podcast has been rolling out all these changes. We're doing subscription models and you're going to be able to make money and like all these things. But yet here we are, June 2021, and Spotify has taken the lead. It's been this back and forth for the last 2 or 3 months. I think Spotify first passed Apple Podcast in April or March of 2021. And now Apple flipped back, and then now the tables have turned again. But at the end of the day, if I look at all of the podcast players, and there are many, you can go look on this site. Like there's so many listed here. Spotify has 30% of the market, and Apple has 27%. The rest is made up incrementally of all the other podcasts. Like it's less than 3% for most of these. And then it just goes down to 0% of like these other players. And it just blows my mind that there's these 2 podcast players. Spotify and Apple Podcast is where the majority of people listen to their shows. And I actually wanted to touch on something. So we're going to dive in here because now you are starting to see more podcast players where people are like, wait, I don't have my show listed there. What is this? So I can see Instagram on here, and I see Chromecast, and I see, what was the other one? Twitter, Facebook, Wix. Like there's a lot of stuff that people are like, wait, that is a social app or that is a website. Like why are these on here? And so somebody else asked this question, and Tom explained it in the IG Live I caught yesterday, and he was saying what they're doing is they're trying to give you the origin of where that podcast listener came from. So while you can't technically listen to a podcast directly in Instagram, as of me recording this, you can't do it. Who knows what it's going to be like in the future, right? But as of right now, if you click on, let's say you go to someone's bio, or maybe the link in the bio that someone has is a direct link to their show where it would pop up in another window. They're trying to let you know, hey, you're getting traction from Instagram, or you're getting traction from Facebook. You're getting people to listen to your show from these different places. And this gets me very excited because you know me, if you've been around here for a while, the marketing aspect and understanding where your people are coming from and how they're engaging with your content is so important to understand. So I really appreciate that they're adding in like just these different areas of how you can really acquire new listeners, but also where people are first discovering about your show. So make sure you go check these out. And if you're like, I don't really care about all the other Buzzsprout, players, or where there are, not the Buzzsprout players, the podcast players that are reading the Buzzsprout stats and all the things, go into your own stats, go into your own analytics and see where are people listening to your show. Is it on Spotify? Is it on Apple Podcasts? Or is it from your Buzzsprout website? Or is it from your own website? They're listening to it in a browser. Go and look at these and understand a little bit more about your own audience. Okay, so devices, countries, device types, like those really haven't changed. Those are basically the same every single month. Let's go down to the numbers that everybody always wants to hear about, right? So if you're in the top 50%, of all of these 105,000 podcasts, you only have to get 28 downloads in a week's time. So if I publish an episode on Thursday, if a week later I have 28 episodes or 28 downloads or more, I'm in the top 50% of all of these Buzzsprout podcasts. That still blows my mind. And it hasn't really changed that much. I think 1 month it was like 24. So maybe it's gone up by 4 downloads. But is that not, it just blows my mind every single time that people think you have to have hundreds, thousands of downloads every single week to be in this category of podcasters. But it's just not the case. It's not. If you are in the top 25%, you only have to have 80 downloads. 80 downloads. I know there's a lot of people listening to this and your shoulders just relaxed and you're like, oh my gosh, really? That's it? I'm in the top 25% or I'm in the top 50% of podcasts because I have 50 people listening to my show. That's amazing. That's awesome. And y'all know we're not about all the numbers around here, right? But at the end of the day, I think that people, when they ask me about numbers and what are my benchmarks and where should I be, I always reference these stats that we're talking about here today because this is the biggest measurement that you can have. This is way better than any information I could give you from my own podcast experience because it's 105,000 other podcasts. It's not just me and you comparing our numbers together. It's you comparing your numbers against all this huge collection of information. Okay, and the next stat is episode duration. So when people ask me, how long should my episodes be? It's a loaded question. Y'all know I have this podcast. I also have the Potty Report. Those episodes are 5 minutes or less. So it can definitely be a wide range of length of your episodes. But what is most common is 20 to 40 minutes is the episode length, is 30% of all these podcasts, which is the highest. So if your episodes are between 20 to 40 minutes, I do feel like that's kind of the sweet spot. I've been recording episodes on this show that are around 25 to 45, and that just feels really comfortable for me. And those are mostly solo episodes. My interviews do tend to be on the longer side, and that is the second highest category that they have here. If your episodes are between 40 to 60%, then you fall into the 23% of people. I don't even know what I just said, y'all. I'm throwing around too many numbers and I'm confusing myself. So I don't know what I said. I meant to say if your episodes are 40 to 60 minutes long, then you are in the 23%. So between the 20 minutes and 60 minutes, that makes up collectively more than half of all these episodes that are being produced every month are between 20 and 60 minutes. That's really what I should have just said. It would have been way less confusing that way. But here we are. You know, you make mistakes, you say things wrong, and that is the beauty of podcasting. So, okay, the last stat is how often are episodes published? And the most popular category, the one that ranks in at 40% of all these episodes or all these podcasts, I guess I should say, is they are publishing every 8 to 14 days, which is more than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be the highest category was going to be around a week, but that's the second largest. So for anybody that's beating themselves up saying, I cannot publish every single week, that's not my way to be consistent, that's okay. It's okay. I know that I preach you need to publish at least once a week. So I feel like I'm kind of putting like my foot in my mouth right now. But at the end of the day, I was having a conversation today with a group of folks on LinkedIn. So shout out to Aaron and Matt and Claire. We had such a great conversation. And the question was asked about, you know, putting out podcasts and creating episodes. And I just keep thinking about consistency for me is what it is for me. Consistency for you may be putting out an episode every 2 weeks because that's all you can manage. And hey, if you can make that work and you can manage to put out content, then that is what you need to do for yourself. I would love to see everyone publishing at least once a week, but that's also not a requirement for podcasting. That's just what I encourage. It's what I really have seen, like, audiences gravitate towards a platform and people be able to grow their platform that way. But if that's not in the cards for you right now, it's not a deal breaker. I love the fact that we can all have our own rules and guidelines for how we run our own shows because that is the beauty of podcasting. So like I said, go to buzzsprout.com/global_stats to see everything that we talked about here today. Thank you all for hanging out with me for another bonus episode. We will be back to discuss July stats later on. And I just am so grateful that you're here hanging out with us on the podcast. If you have not already, make sure you hit that follow button wherever you're listening to this show. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called fan mail shout outs, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Krystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Krystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.